Hello everyone! In this video, I'll be going over tile sheets. Where we left off, currently, we have our little black clear box right here as a start for our GUI. It's good. It's doing exactly what we want it to do. However, there are some problems. The GUI should really have its own camera. So I think we should get started by adding a camera inside the GUI. Initialize this camera, and it's going to want a width and a height, so we can use the window width and window height. And all we really need to do is have GUI take a window for the parameter. So I'll just do this real fast and have GUI want a window. All that's next is to have a public void resize camera, and this will also take a window, and we'll just set the projection to window get width and window get height. And that should be it for the resize camera method. Now that the GUI has its own camera, we can get rid of camera from render. And then change this to just get projection. Now we'll have some errors in the main here, and I'll just pass in window for GUI. Get rid of camera here, and we'll also have GUI resize camera. So now we should be able to resize everything perfectly. The benefits for the GUI to have its own camera is so you can move the camera and you can have the GUI move. So like nice sliding effects for your GUI. I thought that would be pretty nice to have. Alright, now the moment we've all been waiting for. The texture sheet. Basically what a texture sheet or tile sheet really is basically a sheet of textures. So this is the tile sheet. Well, the test one that I have anyways. We got a couple of blank textures, just squares, placeholders so you know where the grid is, and two textures to test out the functionality. Basically what we do is when we create it, we basically pass in values that tell us how many tiles there are going across and down. Now each tile sheet is going to have to be like 5 or 3 squared in this particular example. Otherwise, when you actually do the algorithm to translate the texture, it's not going to do it correctly. So that's one of the downsides to this. But basically, it'll work for 3x3s, 32x32s, just as long as it isn't like 5x10 or something like that. then it should work perfectly. Okay, now that we have all of that, let's get started implementing this. So I'm going to create a new class. I'll just call it tile sheet. It's easier to type. And tile sheet will have a private texture, and I'll call it texture. We're also going to have a private matrix for F for the scale, and a private matrix for F for, go with the translation. Create the constructor, and the constructor will have a string texture and an int amount of tiles. We'll set texture to a new texture, and because I like to have things a little bit organized, I have all the texture sheets inside this sheets folder. You don't have to do that, but I personally like it like that. So I'm just going to have it like that. Plus texture. What is the error? Oh. Alright, there we go. Now we have to set scale to a new matrix for F. We'll scale it by 1.0 F divided by, and cast it to a float, amount of tiles. You're going to want to cast it to a float, otherwise it's not going to work. At least in my experience, it didn't work. Then translation will just equal to a new matrix. So that basically sets up everything. In OpenGL, how the textures work is 0 would be 0, basically. And 1 would be either the width or height of the texture. So let's say we have the texture's width of 640, for example. And you want the texture to go to that 640th pixel there. That's where 1.0 would come in. So we're taking 1.0 and dividing it by the amount of tiles. This way, we get the right values that correspond here in the OpenGL texture coordinate space, pretty much. So, if I remember correctly, the width of this is 48 pixels, and we're basically dividing it by the amount of tiles, and that'll give us this value. It's basically the same thing with OpenGL, because this would be 0, 0, this would be 1, 0. If you're doing 1 divided by the number of tiles, you'll get to this value right there. And all we need is one more method, and that's the bind tile. We'll take a shader, an int of x, and an int of y. Then we'll do scale.translate. We'll just translate x, y, 0, and then we'll put this in translation. Shader, we'll set the uniform of sampler. I think it's sampler. Is it sampler? Yes, it's sampler. We'll set sampler to 0. And this variable we don't have yet. And I'm going to call it text modifier. And we'll pass in translation. It's going to be a matrix 4F. And this method here is going to assume that the shader is compatible with tile sheets, which is what we want. So the tile sheet is pretty much going to assume that the shader does support the texture coordinates, or the tile sheet pretty much. And if it doesn't, well, nothing's going to happen, because we already have the shader class to set to not do anything if the uniform variable isn't found. So if it doesn't support the texture coordinates or the tile sheet, then it's not going to do anything, and we're good on that. All that's left to do is just texture, bind, and then 0. That's it. That is it for the tile sheet. The class anyways. The next thing we have to edit is here in the GUI, vertex shader and fragment shader. In the vertex shader, I'm going to create another uniform map4, and I'm going to call this, of course, text modifier. At least I think that's how I spelt it in, just in case I didn't spell it right. Alright. And you're probably wondering why we're using matrices. I'm not crazy, but remember how we can transform our vertices using matrices? Well, it's the same concept with the texture coordinates. That's pretty interesting, right? Yeah. So what we do here is, inside of parentheses, I'll use text modifier times vec4 of textures 0 and 1, and that will multiply the texture coordinates for us. All we got to do is just do .xy at the end of it. And this just gives us the x and y values, so we can put it inside of texture chords and have it pass over to the vertex shader. Not the vertex shader, the fragment shader. So all we have to do in the fragment shader now is just comment out this GL frag color and uncomment GL frag color texture 2D sampler and texture chords. Perfect. Now let's get all of this set up. I am not going to set that. I'm also not going to have, well, I guess I'll have these. Yeah, I'll have these. I'll also create a tile sheet. I'll call it sheet. And sheet will equal to a new tile sheet. Test.png, oh, not text. Test.png. And since there's 3 tiles in a row and 3 tiles in a column, I'll just put in 3. And that should be it. For initializing. I gotta stop saying that. And all we have to do now is do sheet bind tile. We'll pass in our shader. And I'll pass in 0, 0 for now. Remember, 0, 0 is this 1 right here. And 1, 1 is this 2 right here. So basically 0, 0. This would be 1, 0. This would be 2, 0. And then it would repeat. 0, 1. 1, 1. 2, 1. And then 0, 2. 1, 2. And 2, 2. If you want to have all this bound with just one little variable, and by that I mean like it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll show you how to do that after we see everything works. So let's see if it all works. So I have to resize it to see it, but it definitely works. There's 1. And I'll actually change the scale real fast to 264, -2, and -2. That way we can actually see it. So there is the 1. Oh, not that. And there is 2. And if we replace this with any other value, like 2 and 0, well then it's going to give us a purple box. Purple and pink box. Alright, let's go on to... Oh, why didn't that work? Alright. Let's go on to having only one value to do this with. So I'm going to copy this method and paste it down here. And instead of that, I'm going to get rid of all that. And I'm also going to get rid of int y. And I'll call that tile. Alright, just for now. And all we need to do is just change these values right here. Okay, so I actually had to go for a couple of seconds just to see if I was doing this right, if I had this imagined correctly, and I did. And I also wanted to make sure that I was correct. So I changed the tile sheet. Yes, I changed the tile sheet. I added the Illuminati. It could have been anything. It had to be the Illuminati. Oh, well, it's there. It's there. And that's just to see if everything works, because it should be 0, 1, 2, 3 instead of 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so basically all we have to do is all we have to do is have a private int amount of tiles here. This amount of tiles will equal to amount of tiles. And that basically allows us to do this. Tile, and we're going to use the modulus here, or not tile, amount of tiles. And then y should be tile divided by amount of tiles. And there we go. Why am I getting an error right there? Huh. Well, there's obviously no problem. Okay, so now let's see if this works. I will make it at 1, and if this all works correctly, it should be a purple and pink box. Alright, let's go with 4. If it all works correctly, it should display 2. Zero. Awesome. Now, just for fun, my little new texture. It could have been anything, it just had to be this. It even looks like trash, too. Couldn't have been any better, seriously. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. I hope to see you in the next video. Sorry for not posting for probably over a month. I got caught up in school, and I just wanted to make sure that I passed every class. And, of course, finals, studying for that as well. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next video.